Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition, it's Rockman 1, or Mega Man 1, part of the Rockman Complete Works collection for the PlayStation 1. Many may not know that the Mega Man series, Mega Mans 1 through 6, were released as individual games for the PlayStation 1 back in 1999. And being that this is the March of Mega Man 10, my 10th year of doing Mega Man games in the month of March, I figured we'll go back and relive the classic Mega Man games, and to make things a tad bit different, I would showcase these versions of the games, which are mostly the same. There are two modes in the game, the original classic mode and then the Navi mode, which I'm going to be playing the original. Basically what the Navi mode is it adds navigation to the game, basically giving you hints on how to take care of situations in certain areas of the game. It doesn't really add a whole lot. The other thing is, in the Navi mode, it does allow for an arranged soundtrack, but it's not a complete arranged soundtrack from what I know. It's just tracks from the arcade versions of Mega Man Power Battle, and so some of the Robot Masters don't even end up having updated songs for it in the Complete Works collection. So here we go though with Mega Man 1, Rockman 1 for the PlayStation 1. We're going to start off with Bomb Man, of course, and start working our way over to the right, staying on this middle platform for each of the first enemies that pops up, and then get in between the shots of this enemy here. Some of the other differences include, like, just overall it feels a tad bit different. I feel like the sound is also a little bit different as well, but that could just be me hearing things overall. It's been a little bit since I had played the NES version of Mega Man 1. But for the most part, the game plays pretty much identically. The biggest differences, though, from a gameplay standpoint, are that you can quick change your weapon powers by hitting L1 or R1, which became a standard feature of the Mega Man games on the PlayStation 1, and from there on, you can do that in this version, which is a nice little addition which helps out, especially during certain encounters with enemies, though you can always, of course, pause the game and bring up the menu like normal as well. There isn't a pause screen in this version, so you're unable to do the whole multiple hits by doing the little pause trick, especially against like the Yellow Devil or the final version of Dr. Wily, so you have to beat them legitimately in these versions of the games. There's another menu you can pull up as well, kind of a menu where you can save and load your game. Also included in the version, in the Navi mode, there are a few minor things such as your health bar being more representative of the Rockman 8 health bar, as well as there is also a gallery mode where you can look at information. I'll showcase this at the very end of the game, just showing you guys the pictures in that particular mode. It gives you basically brief profiles on each of the enemies and the Robot Masters, as well as there actually was Pocket Station integration, so you can play Pocket Station minigames if you had that peripheral, but unfortunately we won't be seeing that in this particular version. The first Robot Master we're going to be battling, though, of course, is Bomb Man. For his pattern, he'll throw out multiple bombs and then jump either towards or away from you. He throws out 3 bombs at a time before he makes a movement, so this gives you plenty of opportunity to deliver hits to him. And if you time a nice jump right as the bomb lands, as long as you're a little bit away from it, you easily are able to dodge out of the way. Once we complete him, though, we will move on back to the Robot Master selection screen, moving on now to Guts Man. Guts Man, overall, while he's not too bad of a Robot Master boss-wise, his level has always bugged me to this day, mostly due to the platforming pretty early on in the stage, but it's also a pretty short level, I think one of the shortest in the game. When we start the level, we work our way here, watching out for a couple of the Met enemies, and then once we make it up here, what we have to do is wait for this to kind of come back, and then we're going to jump to it, and as you can notice, along the track, of course, there's little gaps, and when it hits a gap, it instantly falls, and Mega Man, Rockman, falls like an absolute rock in the game, so if you fall off that thing, or you're standing on it when it opens up and goes down, you will end up dropping immediately into the nearby pits. So timing those jumps is one of the trickier aspects probably of the entire game, and something that I still regularly mess up, even to this day after many times of completing it. Here we're going to take out a couple of these minor enemies that throw out their pickaxes towards you. Thankfully they don't do a whole lot of damage, so even taking a hit here I really don't mind, including the last one I'll just kind of walk on through. You want to be careful when you fall down here though, hug left so you don't stay to the far right, because you will end up landing in a spike. The hit detection on the spikes is a little bit off, like even if you're a little bit to the left of the spike, it still sometimes will count as you taking a hit. When you make it down here, the giant machine, I'm just going to take a hit and go right to the boss, though I recommend trying to take it out, if possible, using your blaster. Inside the corridor leading to Guts Man, we have a few Mets laying on the bottom part, and then we enter the battle here, where we're going to switch off to Bomb Man's ability and use that to help us. Guts Man, of course, jumps, causes earthquakes, which will sometimes cause rocks to fall from the ceiling, in which case he will then throw it at us. The rocks break apart into like a 4-shot spread shot. If you time the jumps correctly, right when it breaks, you can jump over the projectiles, but you have to make sure that you keep jumping. Sometimes getting out the bombs and getting them to land exactly where you need them to in order to hit Guts Man can be a little bit difficult, but it only takes 3 bombs and Guts Man will go down, and we're moving on to the next Robot Master, which in this case will be Cut Man. Here we go with Cut Man stage, and it's amazing just to think about how many re-releases they've done of the original Mega Man, from the NES Famicom version to, of course, the PS1 set of games, with each one getting their own disc, and then you have, like, the compilations with the PS2, Xbox, and GameCube, and then the full-blown remake of it on the PlayStation Portable that made everything pseudo-3D, like the 3D kind of characters, which actually was a really fun and well-done remake that included even 2 new robot masters in Oil Man and Time Man. But of course the classic original, which is a bit flawed, one of my least favorite of the classic original 6 Mega Man titles, just because it didn't have that refinement that we got with Mega Man 2 that made it like the all-time instant classic that it became. After some careful maneuvering around a lot of the enemies as we worked our way up the first set of ladders, we now work our way over to the right here. There's a lot of times where I just kind of like barely sneak by a lot of enemies instead of even trying to battle them. Here in Cut Man stage is a really good example of trying to sneak around as much as possible. If you have really fast movement, you can get through that area pretty quickly without actually getting hit. And then other times, like here, I'm going to just time it right so I wait a moment and easily able to get up the ladder. I don't have to worry about bothering with a few of the guys. Now, using some of the Robot Master powers, the ones that we have so far are really not going to be that useful, but other ones, especially with the likes of Elec Man or Fireman's ability, can help you with a lot of the normal enemies that you have to deal with in the regular levels. So if you decide to do things in a slightly different order, which can be a bit difficult, especially if you decide to go after someone like Elec Man or Fireman first. Those are easily the hardest of the 6 Robot Masters included in the title. Watching out for spikes as I make my way down here is another one of those giant robots. This one I'm going to try to take out to try to have some health going into the Cut Man battle. If I get lucky and he does one of those big giant jumps, I'm going to use that to my advantage and quickly run underneath of him to get past. In this corridor you have to deal with a bunch of these like spinning top screw-like enemies that will pop up. There's 3 of them that you have to deal with in the hallway before we end up making it to the boss encounter. Now for this boss fight, you conveniently have 2 giant blocks in the room, so equip Guts Man's super arm ability and use that in order to blast Cut Man. It takes both hits. If you're able to hit him with both of the blocks, any part of the projectile, you will take out Cut Man, and we're moving on to the next Robot Master, which happens to be Elec Man. Easily one of the best songs in the game for sure with Elec Man, even if it is based on a Journey song, which I never knew growing up. It's still instantly one of my all-time favorites as far as Rockman 1 music is concerned. Every time I play Mega Man, the classic original Mega Man, I just want to wait just a moment to jump up these platforms because, of course, the little guy on there will run and charge at you depending upon when you jump on the platforms. Like, if you're on the same platform as him, he immediately starts charging back and forth. And if you time it right, you can kind of get up there without getting hit, or in that first room at least. But I've always wondered, since this is a game that features a score, how many people back in the day would actually go after the high score in Mega Man? A lot of classic arcade games, of course, going after the high score in something, made sense since there's sort of the way the games were set up, but I wonder how many really truly have tried to get the high score in the classic original Mega Man game. Here we have the first example that we're seeing in this run of the disappearing, reappearing blocks, aka the worst thing in the entire Mega Man series. I've hated them forever, I will always hate them. Thankfully, in a lot of the games, there are ways to manipulate and sneak on past, whether it be through certain items like the rush abilities that we would see from later on in the games, or using the magnet platform ability that we get here in Elec Man stage that is mostly going to be helpful when we make it to Iceman's level. If you time your shots just right while going up the ladders in these big rooms where you have those green little robot guys that you see here, and you also see them in the last stage of Dr. Wily's castle, I assume, even though we don't really see the castle in this version. Either way, if you time it right, you can take them out, and I recommend taking multiple of them out before attempting to continue up the ladder. You just end up getting hit and knocked all the way back down to the bottom, and if you do, what I do recommend doing is going off screen, like going back down the ladder and then coming back up to reset them. It's just going to be a little bit easier. Use Gutman's ability in order to go through those rocks, pick up the magnet platform ability. This is essential. You have to have this item in order to get past the Dr. Wily level 1, so that's one of the things you have to make sure that you end up grabbing. We're going to continue up the right side, which I find a little bit easier as far as getting around a lot of enemies, but you do need the super arm, which we can easily use here. And then use the platform ability that we just got in order to create this platform and get on up this way. When we reach the top here, run to the right and just do a little bit of platforming just like we did a little bit earlier in order to make it to that ladder, trying to do my best not to accidentally fall into the pit. On the next screen you have two electricity things coming out here, very easy to kind of get around them and up to that next ladder, and there you are at the room for Elec Man. Watch out for the giant robot, you're going to need all the health possible. Elec Man does the most damage with his weapon in the entire game. In fact, just a couple of hits from Elec Man's electric shock bolt thing will instantly take out Mega Man, just destroy him. So you can use his weakness against him, which is Cut Man's ability. Very, very useful, and I will be using that a bit. I'll also showcase that you can lock Elec Man in a series of moves if you time it right and get a bit of luck. It's something that I've always been pretty good at, mostly out of essential. But it's something I had to learn basically in order to try to get past Elec Man half the time. But we're going to use the Cut Man ability to hit him a couple of times and then switch off to the Mega Buster. And if you time it just right, you can hit him each time, and if you hit him just at the right moment, right before he gets ready to attack again, he won't fire out his projectile. You'll do damage to him, you'll back him away from you, hopefully far away to the far wall, in which case you can also then easily hit him again once he lands, or be prepared at all times when he is moving that you jump in the air, kind of like as just precaution, so that you can try to get above the lightning bolts as they fly across the screen. Next up, we're moving on to Iceman. Another one of my favorites of the game. I'm not sure which Robot Master in the long run is my personal favorite of the ones from 1, but I like Iceman and Elec Man are probably the two that stand out the most, though Gutsman is always awesome. The weakest, I think, majority, I would think that that good old Bomb Man is probably the weakest and least memorable of the Robot Masters, but let me know down in the comments, of course, which is your favorite Robot Master from Mega Man 1. Of the 6 that are available here, unless you're really a big fan of Time Man or Oil Man, from Powered Up or whatever, let me know which one is your personal favorite. I'd like to see what everyone's favorites are. A lot of what ends up deciding if I like a Robot Master is sometimes the power. A lot of times, though, it's just the design or their stage. Like in the more recent ones, like Mega Man 10, I love Strike Man just because he's a baseball-related Robot Master, and that's just amazing. Here we have more disappearing, reappearing blocks. We're going to get past the first section. In the second section, I'm going to cheat a little bit here. Once I make it to this platform here, I'm going to pull out that platform ability and just use that to get across. If you time it where you can make a jump over there, but just so much easier to do that. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of the disappearing, reappearing blocks, that is for certain. These platforms are a bit tricky because they constantly are firing out because they are robots themselves, so trying to make sure that you make the jumps correctly can be a tad bit difficult. Also, messing up may end up causing you to get knocked back due to getting hit, of course, with that knockback being vicious, and accidentally falling in. If you need an extra life, it's very easy to hug that wall and grab it, and the same goes for here. If you have the platform ability and you want to grab some of those little bit of healths, you can do that as well, easily as well, getting up there. Either way, we have another giant robot, and then we travel on into here for the battle against Iceman. We have a long hallway with these penguins that kind of move in the wave pattern. We have a very similar room later on in the game, so this is good practice. Except we have the exploding ones later on instead of penguins. But for Iceman, he fires out 3 shots of ice, starting at the top and then going to the bottom, so 1, 2, 3, and then repeats the process before moving. It's very easy to get in between these particular projectiles with just a little bit of practice. Some people may have trouble with Iceman. I've always been pretty good at getting around him. The one that we're doing last, Fireman, is the one who always ends up dealing a lot of damage to me, even with Iceman's ability, as you will clearly see. And after defeating Iceman, we now move on to the 6th and final robot master before the Dr. Wily levels, of course, and that is Fireman. As we begin the level, we have those, like, screw guys. Now, of course, you can just wait for them to come up if you want to, but I'm a little bit impatient, as you probably know by now, so I'm going to try to just run on through a few of these guys as I'm dealing with this. Heading down this ladder here and to the right, we have the fire that shoots up into the air and then will rain from the sky, as well as the big fire towers. You can use Iceman's ability to freeze these, and that way you can kind of get past a little bit easier, giving you a little bit more time, but for the most part, it's still rather easy to deal with. I don't really recommend going after the little bits of health unless you really desperately need it at this point, because you may just end up clipping the fire, even by just a little bit will cause unnecessary damage and take away any of the health you would have potentially gained from trying to grab them. Make a big leap here to watch out for the laser fire thing. I'm never sure if it's supposed to be a laser or it's supposed to be like fire, but in a lightning type pattern. Either way, we have a couple more towers, and then we drop on down here. Make sure that you're a little bit to the left so you land next to where that first fire tower pops out. And when you go down here, if you decide to fall down the opening, make sure that you're ready to hit right so that you can land on the platform, or to be more safe, of course, go down the ladder. Throughout this entire area, you have many, many, many things of fire raining down from the sky. You also get this really cool tube effect that has fire constantly going through it. I'm never very good at getting through these. You can stop it up if you want to, but just to make things easier, quicker really, not really easier, but quicker for me, I'm just going to end up taking the hit since I have a good amount of health currently at this point in the battle. During this segment here, watch out for the bomb enemies that move in the wave pattern. When you hit them with any blast whatsoever to take them out, they do explode, and the explosion will hurt you. We see these in a couple of stages, including later Dr. Wily levels as well, so just be cautious of those guys. Make a few more leaps across, and after watching out for a couple more fire towers, we enter into the chamber that leads us to Fireman. Now for this whole little part here, we're going to do little jumps up into the air and take out each one of these enemies before we get too close for them to even start firing projectiles out at us, making things a bit easier for us to try to sneak by. Now for Fireman, we're going to be, of course, using Iceman's ability. Fireman dodging his attacks, though, is a bit sporadic. He fires out lots and lots of waves of fire. The fire leaves little trails behind on the ground itself, but that's really not the issue. The key is making sure you keep delivering attacks while doing your best to get out of the way of his attacks. It's difficult, and usually if I end up getting hit, which is often, I just make sure I land in a couple of hits while I'm invulnerable from his previous hit. Now that they're all taken care of, though, we go back to the selection screen. Of course, we're going to select Dr. Wily, now located in the center of the screen, and move on to the first of 4 Dr. Wily levels. When we start the level, be sure to get out the Iceman ability, and you're going to use this to freeze the giant robots as they're jumping. When they do some high jumps, use this and freeze them in the air, and this will allow you to bypass them without having to worry too much about getting hit by them. The last one right there is a little bit trickier because he's starting up on a higher platform, so usually I have to wait for him to either come down and finally do the big jump, or if he does a big leap off that second platform like he did here, I'm able to sneak underneath of him. Watch out for a series of fire towers in the next area, and then climb up the ladder, and watching out for, of course, the spikes, which are instant death, of course. And you don't have invulnerability like you do in the later Mega Man games. Like, if you get hit and land on the spike, and just had gotten hit by an enemy and landed on him, you have that brief bit of invulnerability to get off the spikes. That doesn't exist in Mega Man 1, which makes things that much more difficult to handle. Right here, watch out for the wave pattern bomb dudes. We're going to wait for that second one to bypass us, and this way, when I make that jump over, I don't accidentally hit him in midair and end up landing on the spikes, which has happened multiple times to me. Here we have more of these guys that we saw earlier in the game, and we're going to use them to ride across the gap and head up the ladder on the far right side. Now, when you make it up this ladder, we're going to pull out that platform magnet ability, and we have to use this to help us get up. It's a little tricky at first to kind of master where to put it, but overall, a little bit of practice, and you should be able to get through. Once you make it up that next ladder, though, head on over to the right side, and it's time for the boss fight against the infamous Yellow Devil. The Yellow Devil's weakness is Elec Man's ability, so we're going to make sure that we have that. And what you have to do is dodge a series of the projectiles in that form, the Yellow Devil himself. Once he gets that last piece attached to his body, he opens up the eye on his body somewhere on his face, somewhere on the area of his body. You aren't able to hit him unless he ends up doing that, so you have to pay attention to where it is. Thankfully, the electric move of Elec Man is able to hit a good distance or a good range, so usually I don't end up missing during this. This is a really difficult boss fight, of course, if you don't end up using Elec Man's ability, because you're only taking away one piece of health each time you end up hitting the Yellow Devil, so that's a big challenge if you want to put forth towards yourself. Since the pattern of the Yellow Devil's blocks are the exact same every single time they go back and forth, it's really easy to get a nice little pattern going and just a little bit of memorization, and you should be able to easily dodge each set of these without even getting hit one time during the course of it. It won't wipe you out with one hit either, so you can afford to get hit either multiple times by the pieces or by the blast that his eye does end up sending out once it ends up popping out of his body. Once you deliver the final hit, though, we're moving on to Dr. Wily, stage number 2. For me, this was always the more difficult of the Dr. Wily levels. The first part starts off with a bunch of these little floating robot dudes, and to the right we end up dealing with Cut Man for the second time in the game. Now for this fight, just to showcase things a little bit easier since we don't have the rocks to throw at him, I'm going to of course use the Mega Buster to take him out. He has a pretty sporadic jumping pattern, but very easy to kind of get underneath of him and keep him at bay. Delivering hits with the Mega Buster pushes him back a lot of times, allowing us easily to get around the blade that he throws out. The harder fight, though, is of course coming up, and then the boss of this level in particular is a pretty difficult one to kind of lock. But here, after going through a little bit of platforming, we have our rematch here against Elec Man. Now, while I could try to use the Mega Buster only, which I have done multiple times in the past, it's best to use Cut Man ability, and that way you have a much easier time of being able to take him out and avoid getting blasted by the electricity, considering I'm going to be taking a few hits during this last part here. For this part of the stage, I'm going to watch out for these exploding robot dudes, trying to watch out for the projectiles that they shoot out as they break apart. And in the next segment, you can try to get through easily. You can use the Elec Man ability to help you a little bit that will wipe out these guys. Or if you want to be stubborn and stupid a lot of times, like I am, I just kind of take the hits and continue to run through them anyway. You're going to go through lots of rooms of these enemies, but once you make it past them, though, it is time to battle the Mega Man or Rockman clone. Basically, a device comes down and clones Mega Man, and whatever ability you use, he's going to use as well. So for me, and I've always used just the straight up Mega Buster to take him out. What I like to do is to try to keep him at bay with nicely timed shots. If you time some jumps just right and get lucky a little bit, you can cause him to jump backwards instead of forwards. If he stays away from you, you can just stand still. The only time I have to move is if he ends up getting a little bit too close, which can end up happening sometimes, so you always have to still be a bit cautious. The key for a lot of the fight is standing your ground until absolutely necessary to move, or at least that's the strategy I've always found. Just stand still, keep blasting them until you absolutely positively have to move, and then try to get to another spot where you'll be able to stand. It's a tough fight, but once you're able to take him out, we move on to the third Dr. Wily level. The third Dr. Wily stage is a very, very short one, starting off by watching out for a few enemies. We drop on down, watching out for more of these guys here. I'm not going to get hit by them, but I could afford to get hit once or twice during this segment. There is an opportunity to get a little bit of health back from some of the random enemies. Once you go through a series of this, though, you're going to drop down in this tunnel, and then water is going to rush in and start pushing you towards the right. During this segment, though, you're going to have the penguins that are going to show up, and you have to watch out for them, making sure that you don't accidentally end up running into them. You can take them out. However, halfway through, the penguins will stop coming, and the bomb dudes will start showing up. So I usually just tend to jump over them. That way I don't accidentally hit one and cause the explosion effect that ends up hitting me. Now, for the boss, I'm going to do a strategy that I don't recommend doing. This is the bubble machine boss, and you have these 4 blocks in the middle that will instantly kill one of the bubble machines, as you have a series of them. Instead of using them right away like I do, you want to wait. You want to wait until there's only 4 left and then use them. Also keep in mind that these don't respawn until a game over ends up happening. So, if you're not sure you're going to win, be sure to not use the rocks until you're absolutely sure you're going to win. However, when the final ones are left, I have plenty of health in order to stand here, keep blasting them as they move around the room. I can deliver a lot of hits really quick, and once the machine is fully taken care of, we're moving on to the 4th and final Dr. Wily level. As the stage begins, we're going to make a long jump over to the left side, though I recommend first time, of course, just climb up the platforms. Be sure not to accidentally hit the spikes. And along this way, you're going to have more of those little green robots. Timing your shots just right, you can take them out. And also keep in mind that their electric shocks that they throw out come out from the top and very bottom of them. So you can actually fit comfortably in between those 2 electric blasts. So if you want to try to not shoot them, you can still somehow survive and not end up getting knocked off the ladder, though it's a little bit more difficult. Getting through this corridor is difficult with all these guys blasting at you. I try to activate only 1 at a time, if at all possible. Here we have a repeat of the Guts Man level. We have to wait for the platform to come towards us. But instead of just going right to the ladder, I'm going to grab the special item that's only in this level. The item known as the Yasi Chi, which is only found in this level. It fills up Mega Man's health as well as all of the special weapons if you used any of them. It ends up appearing in a lot of Capcom games. In fact, ended up appearing in Capcom's very first game, which was known as Vulgus. But also, it does appear in other Mega Man titles as well. Though, interestingly enough, in the remake, as we're going to use Fireman's ability easily to take out Bomberman, in the powered-up remake of the game, they actually removed it, though you can still place it in the construction version of the game where you basically build your own Mega Man style of levels, so you still have it in that version. Then we're going to rematch, of course, against Fireman here, using the Iceman ability in order to take him out. We're then going to move on to Iceman's battle here and use Elec Man, of course, to take him out. After he's done and watching out for his projectiles, we move on to the next floor where we battle Gut Man. Now, we will pull out Bomb Man's ability and throw that at him, trying to do my best to jump over the projectiles that he ends up throwing. It's a much more confined space, a little bit harder to get away from Guts Man during this battle, but as long as the bombs are in a decent radius of him, it has a pretty good hitbox, so it ends up hitting him anyway. After going up the last teleporter here, we then move on to the Dr. Wily fight itself. Dr. Wily is broken up into two parts. The first part, we're going to use Fireman's ability. Because of the rotating flame around you when you use Fireman's ability, this allows you to hit Dr. Wily multiple times and really destroys him if you jump correctly. So, as you can see, we just wipe out his first form. Second form, a little bit harder here. Basically, he has this rotating projectile he fires out. When he's going backwards, we can just kind of walk along with him, and as long as we have a little bit of distance between us and him, we can manipulate the shots in order to go over us and get right in there and deliver a hit with the Elec Man ability. Takes a little bit of practice, of course, to get this kind of pattern down. It's a lot easier to hit him when he's going to the right instead of when he's coming forward. But either way, you can thankfully take a couple of hits before you end up getting your health completely wiped. But once you end up taking out Dr. Wily, you can sit back and enjoy the ending to Rockman 1 on the PlayStation 1. So there you have it, Mega Man 1, Rockman 1 on the PlayStation 1. The ending is actually in English, which just like it was in the original Japanese version, or Famicom version of Mega Man 1. And as you can see, the game remains pretty much unchanged. Very little differences as far as this version. The Navi version obviously has more differences, but overall, I just thought the traditional version is still the more fun to play. The Navi version really doesn't add all that much other than making the interface look a little shinier with the health of you and the robot masters or enemies or bosses you're battling, the health bar being a bit different like Mega Man 8's particular health bars, as well as that whole Navi system where you're getting bugged by Dr. Light, or actually Beat the Bird actually even shows up as well, even though he didn't exist in Mega Man 1, he didn't show up till Mega Man 5. He shows up as well to kind of point in directions for you to go. The game also features an easy, normal, and hard difficulty, with this being the normal one, and you do unlock a harder difficulty, which ends up getting rid of power-ups altogether. You still get the Robot Master abilities, but the power-ups in general are just not there, making it really, really difficult to get through. But I'm not a huge fan of that particular version because of it being just unfair at times. But still a nice challenge for those who would want to mess with it. Now here is the gallery mode. I'm just going to show off real quick. Since it's all in Japanese, I can't really read all the dialogue, so I'm sure there's a translation online for each of these. But it's really cool to kind of just have this. All the enemies are included, as well as all the robot masters and bosses for the Dr. Wily Castle are also included, just to show a little information on their name, and then nice little artwork, of course, like the official artwork for them. I love Iceman's, and I love Elec Man's, of course, as well. Just really, really overall cool stuff, and just a nice little addition. If you're a Mega Man fan, if you're a big fan, and you're looking for something slightly different, I recommend this version just as a novelty. And you can, in fact, not only can you, of course, you import it for the original PlayStation 1 if you wanted to, you can actually buy it on the PlayStation Store on the PS3. You can get this and all the other Rockman Complete Works editions if you want to do so. But anyway, guys, that's going to wrap up this edition of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.